All right. After our break, we resume chapter 2, verse 19. We will be looking at continuing through the fourth church, the church of Thyatira. As we learned last week, it is the longest period, a 1,000-year period, that this church was in reigning. And it is also in the chapter, or of all the 7, it is the church with the most verses, the most information. So we will probably be on this church for a little bit, a few more weeks. But let's begin with prayer and we will get started. Loving Father, thank you for your time, or the time that we have to study these 7 churches in detail, and that you have continued to lead and guide us as we seek to understand and apply the lessons each church has for us in these last days. So we thank you for your goodness and your mercies. Bless us with your presence. May holy angels be here. Give us the mind of Christ to understand these things tonight. And if Yvette is joining us, we pray she will soon. Thank you for your righteousness. Teach us now, banish the powers of darkness. May our meeting go well, is our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, we're looking at verse 19. Just a quick recap. Verse 18 started, "These things saith the Son of God," whose I wanted to go all the way back to chapter 1. I want to say, whose eyes are like a flame of fire. I think that's correct. I should look at the text. And feet like fine brass. Is that correct? These things said, yeah, to the angel of the church. So, Son of God, none of the other churches with this time. And as Taylor Bunch, you would know this, Elena, brings out, it's probably to counteract the influence of this rising power called codename Jezebel that eventually would come to be known as the Vicar of Christ. So there's good reason why he addresses this church from the beginning. These things saith the Son of God. And of course, eyes, we looked at that last week. As a flame of fire. Feet like fine brass. And what did we learn from that by way of review? Deanne, you want to speak first?
Okay,
about
so
the brass? About the brass?
about the brass or about the eyes?
Either. We're just
Either.
doing a quick review.
Well, the eyes means he sees all. The brass is the labor where they cleaned themselves before they went into the sanctuary.
The priest? Yeah.
And
That's all I can pick out of my brain right now at this second.
Okay. Hon, did you I wrote down some stuff about the leading industries in Thyatira where they manufactured instruments, bronze, brass, and other metals. Thyatira was also manufactured cloth, purple cloth. But what did we look at in terms of Christ's eyes? Oh yeah, you had a bunch of text here. Deuteronomy 4:24, our God is a consuming fire. Hebrews 12:29. Exodus 24:17, the sight of the glory of the Lord was like consuming fire. That's correct. I also wrote down, somebody brought up one of the possibilities to Christ describing himself with eyes like fire was due to the dwellers in Thyatira worshippers of pagan gods or goddess. Okay. So let's move on to verse, and of course, the fine brass, as you brought out, Leanne. The likening it unto the sanctuary, the altar of the brazen altar, as well as the laver made of brass.
Which was, we said it was learned by experience.
Learned by experience. The looking glasses, of course.
And I think that was in that if you look it up in the concordance, it's 5172.
Okay, yeah.
Hebrew.
5172. The laver, as you mentioned, where they washed, made from the looking glasses in Israel, the women's looking glasses, vanity glasses. So they sacrificed that to make the laver. And so the laver was highly reflective, like a mirror. So when we look into or look at that, when the priests look at that and they come to wash, it's a reflection of the law of God. So when you see it reflects your face, you see the defects, the law points out our defects, you dip into the water and you wash away your this is a spiritual application, you wash away your defects by the grace of God. Okay, back to Thyatira. So now we come to the verse that says, I know thy works. Unlike any of the other churches, there's a list now of descriptive terms: charity, service, faith, patience. You would think this church has it pretty much together. I mean, listen to this: charity and service, faith. He doesn't compliment any of the other churches, at least up till Thyatira, like he does. I mean, that's a compliment. And then we're going to look at this last, the works, and that works, and the last works to be more than the first. So what's going on with Thyatira that they get such a compliment? Anybody uncover anything along those lines?
Well, I liked one thing that I found. It said, from what I was looking up, that it was the only church that improves as it goes along.
Improves?
Mm-hmm.
Improve.
Huh.
It said that this is the only church that improves as it goes along. It seems that as the papacy grew in power and strength, audacity, pride, so the strength of the people of God improved, and as the end of the period dawned, the world was ready for the great new light. So I thought that was interesting.
That's an interesting point indeed.
Because it lasted so long a time.
Yeah.
It was, there are faithful people in that church. They were suffering persecution and everything.
So
But
that patience, then, like you're saying, Elena, because it took so long. Yeah.
So I think it's very difficult to figure out everything that went along in that church, besides all these false doctrines. The Son of God being replaced with the false, Pope, the Pope that took his prerogatives of, he said he's the vicaress of the Son of God. So that's why Jesus presented himself. I am the Son of God.
Right. Yeah. So this is the way God intended it. And we can apply to our day, as things in the world continue to slide into the abyss, morally speaking, the church should be becoming pure on the ascension. in contrast, or it'd be, I guess it'd be like this, one going down, the other going up. So to hear this is really good news, or at least as one commentator said during those long centuries. Faith, patience, charity, service. And okay, the thought just came to me. Why? Why were they able to do this?
Because when you have, go ahead, Mary.
No, I just was saying, why were they what? I didn't.
The thought just entered because of something I read this afternoon in the book here by what's his face from McNulty. Where did the church go? The true church.
Okay. Now we'll let Ann answer it.
Well, I don't know about that line right there, but I do know in persecution of the Dark Ages, you have to make a decision. You can't just slide in one way or slide in the other way. So therefore, the things that were going bad are going bad, but also those people that are coming through this with patience, knowing that the perseverance that they're doing to go through these hard times.
So the church escaped and they went somewhere.
Oh, into the wilderness.
They went into the wilderness. Revelation 12. The woman brings forth a man-child, and the man-child's caught up to God and to his throne. And then the woman says, adios, I'm out of here. Because who's chasing her?
Satan.
The dragon.
The dragon. Yeah.
So the woman is given, verse 6, I think it's verse 13 also said it, but
wings to fly.
the one in 6 is getting her into the wilderness. Yeah, wings, or a place prepared that they would feed her there, 1,203 square. So 1,206 years in the wilderness. Who did this mainly apply to? What group of people?
The Waldenses.
The Waldenses. And they were, for centuries, Rome didn't really start attacking them until I think the latter half of that 1,000-year period. For centuries, they were unmolested. So for centuries, they were unmolested, but then Rome catches up, and there were a series of persecutions all the way to the beginning of the Protestant Reformation, the 1400s or 1500s.
To see this church had such a, we know the main seat was in Rome, okay? But the church had churches in different countries. So in different countries, the persecution was still going on.
Oh, yeah. But to a large degree, Waldenses escaped for much time. Because they were, I mean, you just think about this. We're going to get to go back and look. There's a great video a number of years ago LLT put out. And I think, didn't we have Brianna watch that several times when we got it, like 18 years ago? The church in the wilderness, the Waldenses,
You mean the seventh day video?
Yeah, well, not the set, but it's a separate video that they produced on the wall.
They talk about
it. Yeah, the Church in the Alps or something.
Yeah, that's good.
And they're also known. There were different groups. There's a French Vaudois.
Yeah.
There were
Albigenses.
There was different names. They were all kind of there in the northern Alps of Italy.
There are Huguenots too, the leftover of Huguenots.
Yeah. And so you have this, French Huguenots. So you have this protection for them, and of probably all the religious groups, India too, until the Jesuits, very close, about the time of the Jesuits, in the St. Thomas Christians, to a large degree, they had paganism, but the real persecution began when the papacy or the showed up. So for hundreds of years, many of the churches or God's people in various churches like the Waldenses or the St. Thomas Christians, unmolested. But then the time of persecution, would come. And maybe that's why here we see this picture. I know thy works, service, charity, patience,
Mhm.
because as Mary brought out, over the course of time, the church is ascending. It's holding on to its faith and the
Yeah.
service, it's love, and the works, of course, more than the beginning. Another point on the works, Elaine, I don't know if you read that. It wasn't in it was in McNulty's book. I had not considered that, but he brings out that the more well, here, let me just read it to you.
Yeah, more in the last time, more works.
Their good works in the face of adversity are so noteworthy that they are mentioned twice. The last mention in the good works may represent the Protestant Reformation. I never even considered that, because I'm thinking more local, church in Thyatira, but it's signifying this broad 1,000-year period. And
Yeah.
the Protestant church, the Protestant Reformation, as the church in Thyatira was coming to a close, and we'll see this in the Sardis time period, the Protestant church was beginning, the Protestant Reformation,
Mhm.
the beginning of the 16th century. And so the Thyatiran age is closing and Sardis age is beginning.
Hey, Rod, so when does America come into this? So is that considered the wilderness also?
Well, America doesn't show up yet.
Towards the end of that, right?
Philadelphia.
Well, it would be during the
Philadelphia.
period of Sardis, but
At the end of
the
Sardis.
Pilgrim Fathers came to America, but before we became a nation,
Right. Yeah.
we were pointed out and I think we went over this when we were looking at Revelation chapter 11, I believe, is the time period, or 10, because the 1844 movement occurred in chapter 10, but also, well, chapter 13, verse 11. I saw another beast coming up out of the earth. Why the earth? Because the sea represented multitudes of people, the nations of Europe, for all the way back to thousands of years before. But America was uninhabited. Now, God doesn't consider, probably because of the spiritualism of the Native Americans, not that God won't be able to save some, but Christianity was not brought to America until the Pilgrim and Puritans came. And little by little, and we have a bad history. They should not have treated the Native Americans the way they did. And then, of course, we've got Catholics coming, 60s, or well, back in the early 1800s, we have all of these, what do they call them here in California? Missions. And they were all Spanish missions, Spanish names, but it's because of the Jesuit influence of the priests and what they did, the influence coming up from Latin America.
Some south, yeah.
But back to directly to answer your question, Dan, the Pilgrim Fathers, the Puritans, that all happened simultaneously at the beginning of the 16th century, when Martin Luther and the Reformation is really taking steam, the first 50 years. So God is doing two things at once there. And of course, the Waldenses were already at that point starting to compromise with Rome. And so the baton, so to speak, was being given to the reformers and those who would come to America. Okay, let's get back here. Anything else that we need to look at? We probably won't have as long a study tonight. Charity, service, patience, faith. That anybody wants to comment on? Oh, Okay, does anybody have anything they want to say? If not, I want to look at these two verses in Matthew. Because McNulty brings this up, and I looked at these two verses and I thought, there's something more here. Chapter 24, verse 21 and 22. So Elena or Deanne, if you have either of those verses, if you could read one verse and the other verse.
Which verse? Which
21,
chapter?
24, Matthew 24,
Oh, no.
Matthew 24.
21 and 22. Or Dan, if you have it already.
For then there will be a great tribulation, such has not been since the beginning of the world, until this time, no, nor even ever shall be.
And Elena, if you want to read 22.
22. And except that these days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved. But for the elect's sake, these days shall be shortened.
Okay, so back to 21. Thank you, ladies. Then there shall be great tribulation. Much of the 1,000-year period.
That was the longest, the long tribulation.
As the papacy gaining power, the persecution is, because what's happening as the papacy gains power, what's being shut away from the people?
Yeah.
What are they restricted from having?
Bible.
So only the priests, it's chained up in a convent, wall or something, or the library. So even as late as the Protestant Reformation, Luther, he's because he was raised Catholic, even though his dad wanted to become a lawyer because he knew the way that the priests were. But Martin Luther was really a stubborn man. He was going to do his thing, and but he had, because he was studying to be, and he was a monk for I think a year or something, 2 years, couple of years, few years, and that's where he damaged. His health was really damaged. I don't think ever fully recovered. But he could go into the library of the universities there in Germany, Wittenberg, I think, and he could study the Bible. He came across the Bible, and for the first time. So priests, or those priests in training, they had access, but the common people forget it. Nobody had Bibles. And of course, it was only about 20 some years before, or shortly before Luther was born, not very long. Gutenberg printing press came into being. So by the time the Protestant Reformation is in full force, they're able to, and Luther translated the Bible after his debut. Well, after that big showdown in Worms, he went and what was his name? Frederick, one of the princes of Germany, got him hid in a castle on the way back. But he continued to keep writing while he's translating the New Testament. So all of this was in God's timing. So here's what I want to bring out about these two verses in Matthew. So great tribulation, we got a 1,000-year period. What did it say? Such as now was since the beginning of the world. No, never shall be. But history is going to be repeated.
Yes,
We're
but that will be shorter and more intense.
Shorter but more intense than the long period of 1,260 years. I think we're going to see in taking off from what you just said, Elena, we're going to see very intense, not 12 or 6 years, but maybe 60 days, where we're going to see persecution, compacted, the persecution that will rival the persecution of the Dark Ages. She says, great controversy, she says, instruments of torture will come back. And she lists them there. I mean, and I have a hard time with that, because why would you torture people? Just put a bullet in their head and they're gone. No,
they
because
they enjoy torturing because they want to not to kill, they want to convert them.
oh, so there maybe be used for like in days and gone by. They're going to be used to try to
So,
twist
yeah.
the screws, like
you
literally.
know what they did? They put them on wheels and
Yeah,
they
and they
put and
pull the
drag
arms
them.
off. Oh yeah, it's just
So we
Torture is part of one of Satan's things.
oh
If
yes.
if you're going to stay strong, well, then we'll just see how strong you will be.
Yeah.
Put people through the hardest and the most severe things of these torture instruments and stuff.
Yeah.
That's evil. There's no other way of thinking about it. It's evil.
So 21 and 22, and except to this time, no, nor ever shall be. Well, yeah, the duration never will be, but the intensity repeated, but not the duration. So you have it applies in the past, and it's also featured 22, and except those days should be shortened. Ellen White comments on this distinctly in Great Controversy. She says the person, and Jesus says this in verse 29. We won't go there, but immediately after the tribulation of those days, she says the tribulation was cut short about 25 years before the signs, sun, moon, and stars. About the middle of or coming up to the middle of the 18th century, 1700s.
Yeah.
The sun, what does it say? Great earthquake. You know what earthquake that was? Great Lisbon earthquake, 1755.
Yeah.
So immediately after, so the tribulation was ending. Now you have the three major signs showing we are moving quickly toward the judgment hour. But back to 22, except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved. Well, the same thing's going to happen when the plagues are poured out.
Yeah.
And the persecution leading up, to the
I
plague.
think the plagues will end the persecution.
No, well, yeah, because no Christians will die.
Yes.
The wicked will die. So yeah, you're right on that point.
Referring to the Jacob's trouble, after the close of probation, the probation for the world, just before Jesus comes. So the probation of the world.
But there will be an increasing.
But
before probation closes, there'll be not only an increasing persecution, but there's also going to be destruction.
Yes,
because God, his spirit is almost fully withdrawn.
And then they will blame us.
Oh, yeah, all of that.
Everything will combine.
And particularly Seventh-day Adventists. These are the troublers of the people. We need to exterminate them. And I don't, not to go too far off because it's easy to get off on tangents, but for my studies, the international death decree will go into effect about the time probationary time closes.
Yes.
It's going to be just days apart.
But then the plagues will end.
And then I'm thinking it's 2 weeks into the plagues. God's voice speaks and turns the people of God their captivity. Okay, so I just wanted to bring out, because I really think 21, 22 has the double-double, not the double-double principle, but it has application.
Yeah.
You trying to show it so you don't have any white hair, huh? Because all of a sudden,
my thing is not working because I look really dark.
Yeah, you do look dark. Is that because of something with your camera?
I think so. Go ahead.
Okay. Anyhow, sorry about that. I'll have to edit that up. So I think these two verses, 21, 22, are really telling us what happened in the past during the long dark age is going to happen again. But as Elena put it very, very succinctly, short, but very intense.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything more in going back to Revelation 2, anything more to look at in these verses or this verse. So I think what we'll do, unless ladies, you have something else you want to share on that, we'll cut this thing short.
Yeah.
He says down here, the Protestant Reformation of the 1500s and the subsequent end to the persecution of God's true church by the now there, McNulty's saying by the 1560s fulfills the part of Christ's prophecy that we just read in Matthew, that the days of tribulation would be short. I thought it was more into the 1600s or even early 17, but maybe not. Maybe the Protestant, because listen, well, maybe that's why he said 1560s, because they were still putting people to death in the French in the Protestant Reformation. The French Revolution, there's persecution there, and that's all the way. I mean, we're another 200 years in the future.
That's when they revolted against the Christian totally. It didn't
Exactly.
matter which
Paganism
kind.
took over
Yeah.
the secular
Yeah.
atheists, like we're seeing in our government now.
So they punished the Catholics and Christian all.
And right now, that's really what's happening. If you're listening to alternative news, they're going after Catholics who are outside abortion clinics or Catholics, you know, certain rallies. And this is kind of, you think, why would the devil be? The devil doesn't care. Listen, God has more of his faithful children in the Catholic fold than our own.
Yeah.
And when they hear the truth, they're going to come, but not until God has a people ready to call them out. Okay, so I think what we'll do is the next or in our next segment, we're going to look at, I don't know if we can get through all, because this might take 2 or 3 weeks, but the next 4 verses, 20 through 23, are probably the hardest verses of the chapter. I mean, they carry the most punch. So let's see how far we can get next week. Maybe just 2 verses, maybe 3, I don't know. But if we can, we'll look to the next 2 weeks, cover these next 4 verses, 20 through 23, because there is some real, I mean, these are strong verses. And 23 especially, I want to spend a little time on. That may not be next week, it may be the week before. So that will be our study for next week. All right, good study, shorter, but that's okay. Will give us prayer time earlier. We can maybe even finish earlier. So keep studying, ladies, keep praying, and we'll see how God will continue to lead and guide us as we go forward. I probably, before I shut off the video, maybe after we finish Thyatira, I'll take a couple weeks, or at least a whole segment, and we'll go back and do a review of all the first 4 churches, because we don't want to forget Ephesus, Smyrna, and Pergamos. So maybe we could be on Thyatira through the month of September. There's that much we've got to cover. So maybe beginning of October we'll do a review again. Okay, we will close out.